Hello, my name is Nickon Kashi, and this is my policy prescription for Iran. I am in the online Poly 256 class for Professor Zook. So currently, the type of government that Iran has is a theocratic government, which is essentially a government that's focused and centered around religion. And in this case, it's Islam, seeing as how that's the predominant religion. But they do exhibit some aspects of Western politics and governmental systems. They have the parliamentary system in the unitary system from the UK, which is essentially an election system of executive members. Not executive members. For legislative members, for legislative members in order to elect people, and then like the presidential system from America in order to elect a figurehead in terms of politics in order to connect with the people more. But seeing as how there's the corruption as I've spoken of in the past and will be speaking of later in this video, some things don't work out as much. And although we see the president as a person with high political power here in America, when it comes to Iran, we see it's more so chosen not by the people, but by the religious figurehead that's currently in power. But currently, Iran is well known for its rich cultural history, like being one of the greatest former empires in civilization, especially for being the capital of Persia, its extreme priority towards education, seeing as how they have a high literacy rate, along with high levels of credentials and excellence in the educational field, when it comes to fields like in the sciences like biology, richness in resources, and then the largest economy in the Middle East, seeing as how they have the largest oil field in the world, largest oil field in general. Now, in terms of resources, Iran's rich in primarily oil and natural gas, seeing as those are the big ones. Mainly their economy has been surviving due to how countries like India, China, and Russia buy oil from them, seeing as how they have problems with the US. Meanwhile, the other resources out there are coal, chromium, copper, iron ore, lead, magnesium, zinc, and sulfur, giving them some form of diversity at least, in order to make sure that they don't have to just rely on those two resources. Although this allows them to be diverse, it's more so a question of when are these resources are going to run out. Because resources like natural gas are environmentally dangerous when it comes to extracting them, and not only that, coal and oil are non-renewable resources. Now, talking about the educational reputation, as I said, Iranians tend to take education very seriously and tend to be highly regarded, especially in the scientific area, due to the number of scientific journals that have been published. Some of these achievements that you can see listed is their 90% literacy rate among adults, how they're ranked 4th globally when it comes to colleges and universities, which speaks to how they are dedicated. The period of compulsory education is ranked 82nd globally, and meanwhile, their government spending on education is ranked 8th globally, which means that overall they recognize that in order to improve their own country, and not only that, the lives of their very own citizens, and education is highly important, especially in today's highly competitive world where people are starting to need more and more bachelor's degrees. Hence the high level of success that they've achieved in their universities. Now, when it comes to what the Iranian citizens want, they want to move more so away from the theocratic government due to how there's been high levels of complications with that, especially with the higher level of corruption. Now, since 2009, there have been 3 highly important political protests I have spoken of in my fieldwork paper, one of which was the most recent in December 2017, which was most widespread. But although it was more widespread, some of the people denounced it due to some of the destruction it caused. But aside from that, the 2 goals that they have are to take away the enormous amount of control that the Iranian government has, and achieve a more democratic society in which their political voices are heard. Because when you think about corruption, you think about how the voices are silenced in order to prevent the citizens from speaking out. and only a few have the power. In this case, that's how it is. When it comes to the big political protests that happen, there's three. Oh my lord. Now, these political protests happen because the people can see this corruption occurring in broad daylight. Knowing that, it's three key forms: cronyism, which is essentially partiality or easily giving jobs to people you like. So, for example, friends, family, relatives, trusted colleagues. Nepotism, you granting favors in various fields in order to get a favor back. This is more so helping to climb a ladder. And then patronage, which is the most simple of all. And it's just simply giving money or other favors in order to gain support. Although these three seem simple to get rid of, the bigger question to ask is more simply, how do you get rid of it? Especially in a governmental system that has a long, deep-rooted history with this. Not only that, aside from the political corruption, there's also high levels of pollution due to the amount of oil that's being used, along with all the cars, the overcrowding, which also causes the pollution, and the economic instability, seeing as how some of it's been caused by the US, or a good chunk. Now, when it comes to solving the political problem, there isn't a solid way, since, as I've said, it's very deeply rooted. This has been dated back for a long time, and even when the US acted as a colonial power, it was still there in the presence of the Shah's powers and implementations, mainly due to how he wanted to silence political dissenters. Currently, so far, that's the same thing. The current government does not like it when people attempt to speak out. So what they do is that they try to keep these people out in order to make sure that they don't gain a popular following in Iran. So these people have to leave the country if they want to speak out, but they're never allowed back. Another thing that the Iranian government has done is block the flow of information when it comes to the internet. So say, for example, you have access to Facebook, but there's certain sites that you can't obtain or you can't go onto. But you can access Facebook, Snapchat, things like that. So although it may seem like there is internet, it's just limited by the government to a certain degree, heavily. Now, when it comes to the solution to pollution, there is a lot of pollution due to how heavily overcrowded it is, since people are traveling everywhere by motorcycle, car, bus. Wherever they need to go, they need to access a car, mainly because they need to have somewhere to get. And especially since how this country is rich in oil, it's something more so that people take for granted, mainly just because of that. So, instead they try to use natural gas, seeing as how they have a nice supply of it, and become the third biggest consumer. But although it burns more cleanly, as we can see, there is proof that it's environmentally destructive still. Not one of the reasons why it's environmentally destructive is due to how when you're fracking in order to obtain natural gas, what you're launching down under the ground is a solution of water, sand, and multiple mixtures of chemicals in order to make sure that you can extract the gas. But the problem though is that they don't extract the chemicals in the end. Instead, the chemicals are left there and they're potentially going to seep into close by water supplies, which could contaminate them and harm people. Now, when it comes to the nuclear deal, which was made by Obama in 2016, although nuclear energy is very clean and the cleanest burning of them all, and there's risk with them concerning the nuclear meltdowns, it tends to be seen as the best solution. But the problem though is that there's distrust among people, both in terms of political activists and people in the international community who are politicians, due to how Iran has a history with nuclear dealings and have a desire to still obtain nuclear weapons in order to be on the same playing field as the US, along with other countries with nuclear weapons, due to how they want to be taken seriously. Not only that, when it comes to pollution though, although we can simply say more investment into green technology so as to lessen dependence on non-renewable resources, when you visit Iran itself and you see the situation, you get more of an understanding of what's going on. You wonder where or how you should place these green technologies, like for maximum efficiency. If you place, for example, the solar panels or the windmills outside in the mountain ranges, you have part of the problem solved, but the next part is how do you transport it? There's going to be a loss of energy, and then there's loss of space when it comes to the overcrowding problem. So when it comes to the pollution problem, there's no clear answer. But I personally believe that if we place the solar panels on the rooftops, that would be able to help a lot, at least in terms of space, seeing as how we could still save up on that. Now, with overcrowding, this is attributed to things like citizens from neighboring countries, for example Afghanistan or Pakistan, coming into Iran, seeing as how there's less war, there's less trouble, and compared to the other economies there, Iran has the biggest economy in the Middle East, as stated earlier. So it seems to make the most sense to them when it comes to where to move. It's most cost effective to move there. You can easily obtain a car. Let's see what else. Jobs are somewhat available depending on the economy, although there's economic instability. But I'm sidetracking. Anyways, when it comes to how to solve the overcrowding problem, although there's unused mountain ranges, they are quite spacious when it comes to how much space there is, and there's very little to no people living out there. Not only that, due to the large influx of people, there could be heavier limitations as to who we could let in. So that way we can at least slow down the overcrowding level. Not only that, one of the problems that has been presented due to the overcrowding is the fact that physicians and other public services aren't able to keep up because there's just so many people. There's too much demand but not enough supply. So we need to help them out in order to make sure that at least they can start catching up and help people when they're most needed. And then finally, ways to stabilize the economy. Now, when it comes to instability of the economy, that can be attributed primarily to the economic sanctions levied by the U.S. due to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Now, these economic sanctions were levied for 2 decades. Although China, India, and Russia were primary buyers of oil from the United States, there's still international pressure, pressuring them into not to buy oil from them or any products along with from other countries. So Iran is now more self-centered and more alone. But although it is reasonable to say make more investments towards companies or small businesses in Iran, one of the such problems is that when you start doing research and you understand the level of the political corruption, seeing as how it's not just present in politics but also in economics and places like the military too, you start to wonder, is it a safe investment to go into there? Not only that, another possible solution, although it's by far more or less likely, is to improve relations with America to the point where they become a big customer for oil. This seems least likely because, especially with the current presidency and the rhetoric, along with the current presidency rhetoric, this seems a lot more unlikely due to how, and this is the result of what Trump has said, how he doesn't trust the nuclear deal with Iran, how it was a bad end for the US, has led to more distrust. Now, are these solutions viable? When it comes to the short term, yes. We can get to the table, we can talk, we can set terms and conditions, and we can put them in place for a short period of time. But in the long term, we're not really sure, because that's when the effects are truly supposed to take root. We're not sure if they're going to be positive or negative. We can have large amounts of research data. We don't know. We're not sure as to where we can go or what can happen. All we can know for sure is that if we make this decision, we dedicate to it. That is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Nickon Kashi, and I am a student in Professor Zook's Poly 256 online web class for Montgomery College.